show today. We've got Richard Covington, the executive pastor of operations, and if we have time, we'll do some Tales from the Brick, where Trace gives his best story of the week from the brick. But I'm
scared about that.
It's going to be great. Richard Covington, he is the executive pastor of operations at the Heights Church. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Let's get to know him a little bit. We got some questions for you.
I think it'd be great. All right, so here's the thing, Richard. Everyone would like to know what we could do to help cheer you up a little bit.
Okay.
Because sometimes you walk around here and you're in a great mood. You're in a great mood, but the face doesn't say that you're in a great mood. So sometimes we'd like to know, how can we make your day better? So, Richard, what is one thing that instantly makes your day better?
Gosh, so many things make my day better. Ice cream. I love ice cream.
What flavor are we talking
Chocolate
about?
chip all the way.
Chocolate chip all the way.
Yeah, 100%.
Chocolate ice cream with chocolate chips?
No, just chocolate chip ice cream.
Okay.
Dairy Queen, Brahms, what are we talking
If you're going to Dairy Queen, you got to do the Blizzard, chocolate chip Blizzard. Not on the menu, but you can ask for it.
It goes off menu. Wow. I like that.
Off menu, for sure.
Man who knows what he wants.
If you go to Marble Slab or Cold Stone, it's sweet cream with chocolate chips mixed in. If you go to Brahms just chocolate chip ice cream. Bluebell chocolate chip ice cream. It's pretty easy. Ice cream with chocolate chips in it.
I don't even like ice cream.
Pastor Appreciation Month is in October.
Come on.
You know what?
I love it.
Good point.
But another person that can make my day better is Judd Hardage.
Ice cream and Judd Hardage.
Yes, I love Judd. He makes me laugh.
I really want to watch Judd and Richard go on an ice cream date together.
We can.
Can we send a camera with them? Can
Absolutely.
we do that?
That's good content for
See
us.
what happens.
Yeah.
Judd makes me laugh, and then I envy Judd's relationship that he has with the head football coach at Texas Tech, and so
That's fair.
I like to talk to him about all things Texas Tech athletics. So
You went to Tech.
no, I was a no-show at Tech. I registered for Tech.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why didn't you show up?
Because God called me to the ministry that summer, and I thought at the time I had to go to a Christian school, so I did not go to Tech and was a no-show, and ended up going to Dallas Baptist University, which was the right decision for me.
Sure.
It was good. Yeah,
It's a good place.
Let's jump into that. What was your call to ministry like? Talk us through what that is. Was it a moment? Was it a gradual thing? What happened?
100% a moment, and it was Valentine's Day. My senior year in high school in 1988. Our church, First Baptist Church, Sulphur Springs, had a Valentine's banquet, and Bill Bates spoke at this banquet, and I remember going to this. I don't remember a whole lot of what that man said, but what I do remember is two very distinct things. Number one, this overwhelming call to ministry as a vocation that I've never entertained prior to that, came out of thin air. It just was God-given, honestly. And the second one was to teach Sunday school. And so we didn't have a student pastor at the time, so I went to the music minister of the church and said, this is what's happening. I don't know what to do with these thoughts. And he said, well, we certainly want to work through with you this call to ministry. But the Sunday school thing, we really want you to be in Sunday school as your senior year in high school, but let me see what I can do. And he came back with me and he said, I think what we're going to do is the last Sunday of the month, we want you to go to this class and we'll give you all the curriculum and then you can teach them. It just happened to be the oldest ladies class in the entire church. So it was honestly like when you graduate this class, you see Jesus face to face. And so they were the best. I can't tell you how amazing these ladies were in my life as a 17-year-old kid. They prayed for me. Even when I went to school and came back on the weekends, that's where I would go. They would make me cookies, and they made me things for my dorm. They prayed me through university, and all of them obviously now are seeing Jesus face to face, but they were a massive, massive part of my early years in ministry. Then it was that summer at summer camp that I solidified the call to ministry. And that was it.
That's really cool that they were kind of intertwined, right? That there was a future calling, but a current calling too, right? And I love that there was like here's a next step to take now in the process of where the Lord was going to lead you full time into ministry.
Yeah, Trace, I've never thought about that until that moment when you just said it. And I love that. I think that's so God-given. That's how God does it, right? And I've always known that, and I've always put those two things together and talking about my calling, but I've never thought about it as the future calling and the current calling. But you are 100% right. That'll preach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I wanted to ask you, David, because, Richard shared what his first time was. And so I'm just curious, what was your first teaching assignment that was given you? Because I had a small group that I led, but the first time, I'll never forget the first time that my pastor, after I felt called to ministry, my student pastor said, hey, we're going to read through this book together called Humility. And then you're going to preach for the first time on Philippians 2. And so that passage has always stayed with me because it was the very first time that I got to preach. So what was your first teaching opportunity?
First teaching opportunity would have been, like in 7th grade. I was asked by my teacher to lead something. First preaching opportunity was when I was in seminary. I went back to my home church and got up and thought, I got a lot of things to say. And I did have a lot of things to say. It wasn't coherent. It wasn't a good sermon. It was terrible. You will never find that sermon because it was so bad. And so, yeah, that was my first one. And I feel like with everybody, it's just really bad. But I say that to tell you this. It's because 2 weeks later, I was in my preaching class at DTS. And I was feeling like I just knocked that sermon out of the park. Like that sermon that I did, my gosh, it was just amazing. I waxed eloquently for 45 minutes and I was thinking I got this. Now, granted, I spent about 3 months memorizing this thing and it was still terrible, but I get up to preach, and you guys have been in these preaching classes. It's 12 of your best friends. You think that you're all about to go to the Passion stage or Together for the Gospel or lead a megachurch, and so the competition is high in there. I get up thinking that I'm going to give this 12-minute sermon, and I froze. Absolutely, most humiliating moment of my life.
Yeah,
absolutely froze. And honestly, what I interpret that as is the Lord really showing me preparation matters. What you say matters. Speaking from the Word rather than speaking from what you have to say matters. And from that moment on, because of that humiliating experience and because of the previous one before it of knowing how arrogant that I really was, there's just been a healthy dose, I would hope, of humility and preparation that comes with preaching.
Yeah. There's an awesome responsibility with that, right?
Incredible.
Because when you stand on that stage in whatever context you're in, those people that you're talking to, they don't need to hear what you have to say. They need to hear what God has to say through his word.
Yeah.
And you, as a messenger of his word, are just there to be the mouthpiece and to help bring some illumination to those words. So it's not about you, right?
No.
It's all about Jesus all the time.
And
all
it's
the
funny
time.
that you say that. I was going to ask you how long you went for, because I think back to the first time that I was asked to come back and speak to the student ministry I grew up in as a sophomore in college. And literally, I spent the first over 30 minutes just telling jokes because I had the audience rolling. They were rolling, and it was 30 minutes into it. And I looked down and go, "Oh, I haven't even gotten started yet." I was like, "Oh, well, it's okay. I'll just start." And I went for over an hour. And my mentor,
panic goes over everyone's face.
My mentor, Chris Dupree, who came and spoke for us at Chi Alpha and again for the whole church back in April. He was gracious enough to let me finish, but then helped coach me through that. But Richard, you've told me before, so I'm curious, how long was your first sermon?
But mine was a little bit opposite of what yours was. It was while I was in college, and I don't even remember why, but they wanted the student could come, this little bitty church somewhere in East Texas. I don't even remember where it was, but it was tiny. I remember went out there and I opened the passage of scripture and read the scripture for the day, said a couple words about it, and then literally said, "And that's all I have to say about that." And it was done. And I would think it was the shortest sermon that church has ever had. It was maybe 5 minutes, 7 at the max. Yeah, it was awesome.
How many years have you been in ministry now?
I've gotten a check from a church since I was 18.
18.
Consistently.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
Subtract your age is...
Yeah, I don't even know. I'm not good at math. 52. So what is that? 34 years? Yeah.
Well, take that at 52 now, flip those numbers and imagine yourself at 25, or
Yep.
imagine a bunch of other guys now who are at 25 who
Yeah.
are just starting out in ministry. What do you know at 52 that you would have told yourself at 25 that would have made your life a whole lot easier?
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, I would say you don't know everything at 25. And you already mentioned it, that, yeah, these young whippersnappers who are preaching in preaching class think they're ready to take the passion stage. There's a whole lot young ministers can learn from older, seasoned pastors. And so I would not shy away from mentorship at all. I would welcome it. And so I would gravitate towards that. And I would also say be cautious of always trying to do and strive to go to the next thing. Like the grass is always greener at this church. I get a different opportunity and get to do this and more money. And there is something to be said about the minister who stays and stays and stays and sets down deep roots and calls one church home for many, many, many years. There's rich ministry that can take place in year 15 that can never take place in year 3. Now, obviously, what trumps all that is God's call. And so if God's call is to call you to a different church, you go. And if it's 15 churches in a career, you do it. You follow God's call. But there is some richness about being rooted in one place that I think is important for ministers to understand. And so when the first crisis comes, that's not the time to flee. It's the time to dig in and to learn from your mistakes and set some deep roots down.
That's a good word.
I don't know about you, David, but I feel like I just heard an open invite to stay for however long we want to. I think we just got guaranteed contracts.
A lifetime contract?
I think so.
We sign those
That's what I
right
heard
now. Let's
Hey,
eat that.
listen, you guys are awesome. And you are both incredibly talented in the ministry that you do. David, you're one of the most gifted preachers I've ever heard. And so God uses you mightily in the pulpit. And Trace, you're going to preach for the first time this Sunday. I know that this podcast will probably be up after that, but I'm incredibly proud about that and watching you guys blossom in your ministries. And it's an honor to serve with you guys. And if God called you here for 30 years, it would be an awesome opportunity to serve with you.
Yeah,
Thanks, brother.
I love what you said too there about blossom, because I've been given the same counsel at critical moments in my time in ministry where it seemed like maybe it would be better to jump ship. But oftentimes I've heard either from someone directly or from the Lord speaking to me just that idea of bloom where you're planted, right? And so for me, you saying that, I identify with that a lot, and I think that that's really, really good advice as both of us are in our, I'm still early 30s for a couple weeks. You're mid 30s for right
I'm
now.
still early 30s.
I'm 34, but I think as we're just exiting that stage, I look back and I go, yeah, that's great, and I've benefited from listening to that.
Yeah.
Even though at some times when I was 25, I didn't have the humility to listen to that point.
No, it's good. So this is more of a lighthearted question, but when you look back on your life, when you look back at the 21 years of the Heights, when you look back on the 52 years of life, if there was one actor to play you in the biopic of your life, who would it be?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I have this, I don't know. Who's the guy who plays Roy Kent on
Brett Goldstein.
Gary talked about him on Sunday. There's, people, this may be typecast, stereocast, whatever. People say I have, and you've already alluded to it, that I have this grumpy resting face, and I don't like that, right?
You don't like that people say that, or you don't like to have it?
First of all, I don't believe them.
You don't believe them?
And then I don't like it if it's true, right? But I don't know. So if I'm going along with what everybody else says, it'd probably be, that Roy Kent character type of guy. I don't know. But that's not something, if that is true, that's something I'm not proud of, honestly.
Well, and I don't mean to say that is true about you, because that's not it at all. Like, that's not your heart.
I don't
No,
see
it's
that.
But there's sometimes where
I don't see that. Yeah.
sometimes we have an exterior that we walk around with, and
Yeah.
people get to know us, and they get to know that there's something completely different underneath that. And you mentioned it. Y'all have been gracious to talk about it already. But when I got the call from Gary to preach,
Yeah.
and they put that in the spreadsheet where we kind of track what we're going to be teaching
Yeah.
on, the very first person that tried to reach out to me, not the first person I heard from, because I missed your phone call, then I tried to call you back, and then we finally connected, but the first words out of your mouth after that were, man, I saw your name on there and it brought me to tears. And that was incredibly meaningful to me. Just the way that you do encourage, and that is your heart for the whole team, but also for young ministers, even as you've alluded to right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so great about you being in your role of executive pastor of operations.
Yeah. You're my kid's student pastor, and you'll be my third kid's student pastor next year. And I have a soft spot for student ministry. God called me initially into ministry and student ministry, and I honestly thought at the time I would be a lifer in student ministry. And so when Trace, when I see God using you and giving you more opportunities to use the gifts that He's given you, gosh, it makes me so happy, and it makes me honestly really proud. Not that I did anything to get you to the point where you are now, but it just makes me proud.
No, but you've supported me.
Yeah.
There have been key moments even here where, there's always a transition period, and there's been moments where you've encouraged me and lifted me up. And, that, speaking of lighthearted questions, I think back to your time and some of the stories you tell me about being in student ministry a while ago. You have known quite a few famous people.
Yeah.
So who is the most famous person in your phone?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd probably be the, I don't know how famous he is necessarily, but it's probably the student pastor that I served under when I interned at the Heights, and that's Joe Simpson.
And who are his daughters again?
Yeah, Jessica and Ashley Simpson. People know that are associated with the Heights that he used to be student pastor here. And the girls grew up in ministry here at the Heights. So, yeah, they're a very important family to me. And my oldest son was named after Colin, was named after Joe. And so it's Joe Truett Simpson, Colin.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, but also in other circles, there's some more famous people. I mean, you were kind of in that group in previous conversations that we've had. You told me that you've been in that group where that maybe early 90s, they were just starting out. Tomlin, Matt Carter, those guys. You worked with Matt Carter, Crowder. You worked with Carter for a while, right?
Yeah, we never actually worked on the same staff together. We actually did some camps together a couple consecutive years. But most people who are listening to this podcast may not even know who Matt Carter is. He's a solid preacher who started and founded Austin Stone Community Church in Austin. And so, yeah, there were some initial conversations about working with him in Austin when that church was being started. So,
well, here's the thing, Richard. I think a lot of people know, or at least have an idea when they hear student pastor, what a student pastor does, or they hear groups pastor, they may have an idea of what a groups pastor is. But what is it that you do day to day as the executive pastor of operations at the Heights?
Yeah. What would you say you do here?
Yeah, lots of things. First of all, I love my job. I think when you look at different churches and you have the term executive pastor, that can mean so many different things for so many different churches. Some churches just have one executive pastor. We have two executive pastors in our church. And so there's lots of similarities in those positions, but there's also tons of differences. And so when you look at the operations, basically that is the day-to-day operations of the church primarily. It's taking care of the building. It's taking care of the church finances. And so, but then other responsibilities that I have in addition to those two is also oversee weekend experiences and worship, oversee missions, oversee Heights in Spanish, and staff from a human resources perspective. So,
Well, you work with the budget, and you put in a ton of time to get the budget ready for next fiscal year. We've got our church annual meeting coming up. My church growing up, the tagline was always, the church's business is your business. Talk us through, why is something as mechanical, something as financial, something as just wrote as a budget, from a ministry perspective, why is that so important? How is that a pastoral tool to you?
Yeah, because honestly, God's people give money to the local church. And it's not our money, it's God's money. It's when we give to the church, we are simply saying, God, thank you. We are dependent upon you. We believe everything is yours, and we are joyfully giving back a portion of our first fruits back to you. And so any money that is a part of the Heights has been given by godly men and women. And so there's a lot of responsibility to steward that well and to steward that for the kingdom of God. And so we have really good men and women who serve in leadership in many different committees here at the church, whether it be finance or personnel or missions. Missions oversees missions budget committee. The finance team oversees the overall church budget, and then personnel oversees the personnel budget. So me in my seat, I just have an opportunity to help work with these teams to make sure we're stewarding God's resources as best as we possibly can. The idea in all of it is that we want to expand God's kingdom, right? God allows us to be a part of expanding his kingdom, and these resources are used for that. And so we want to make sure that we have money to do all the things that we believe God is telling you to do in student ministry and you to do in groups. And so there's just a long process. There's a balance game on that, because you got to keep the lights on. You got to figure out how you're going to pay those bills. Electricity continues to go up, unfortunately. It costs money to heat and cool the building, and those fixed costs are rock and roll. And then also we want to make sure our personnel team's passionate about making sure that our staff is taken care of. And then there's always a balance. So it's a fun job, but there's a balance to it.
I love that inside baseball talk now, because I think sometimes, we've had people who are like, well, what do you do during the rest of the week?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. What's your other job?
Yeah. What's your other job? I'm working here all the time. And so I think that helps give people a robust picture of what ministry looks like day to day. But you've worn so many different hats in your 21 years at the Heights.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself living out of the calling that God has placed on your life for ministry, which is clear and God has used to impact people for many years now? How do you see yourself living out of the calling that God has given you, and how do you see the way that he has given you spiritual gifts that just kind of are coming alive now in this role?
Yeah, so earlier in our podcast, we talked about me being in that old ladies class.
Yeah.
And you talked about the fact that here and the now, right? So the future calling, but also the now calling. So I would probably answer that question by saying this, that early in my ministry, I believe that God had a place for me and a purpose for me at every step of the way, at every role. But I also believe that in all of those times, he was preparing me for what I'm doing now. So there was always a calling for what I was doing then, but then there was always a calling for what he wants me on a teaching and a training time for what he wants to be doing now. And so honestly, I think that what I'm doing now, I just think that God made me for this. And I have incredible joy being able to do what I do. And God really orchestrated it and led it all the way.
Do you think that having that experience of student pastor, missions pastor, and I'm sure so many other roles in there, do you think having those experiences of knowing what it's like in the trenches of those ministries has helped you be the executive pastor of operations that you currently are?
100%. Yeah, because I know, and I think it's a different world now that you're a student pastor than when I was a student pastor. But I know the world a little bit, right? And so when it comes to budgeting, we talked about this before. When you came to me and said, I really need to do this, and I said, okay, well, we got to figure out how to make that happen, and we did that. We figured it out through the budgeting process, and so for me to be able to be a part of that process and understand that, immensely powerful and helpful for me to have that training. And I really feel like me and my role is to kind of pave the way a little bit for you guys.
Almost like a lead blocker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like be really a strong lead blocker, a fullback, if you will, whatever you want to call it. Just clearing the space for you guys to flourish and for you guys to use that word blossom again and to do your ministry. And there's a lot of joy in me doing that. And so when I see Trace, you thrive, David, when I see you thrive, and other young ministers in our church, there's a lot of pride, you know, and that's not pride. It's just a proud big brother. Let's not say dad. Let's just say a proud big brother, just cheering you guys on and being able to be a part of that in some small ways is awesome.
But we appreciate that because,
we do.
You do clear the holes for us to go and run.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, we were trying to figure out what does evangelism look like? What's it going to cost for us to be able to do what we feel that God's called us to do, and really opening up the whole to make disciples, do evangelism. And you asked me to put together some numbers, and I put together what I thought was, a conservative, estimate. Walked in and you're like, oh man, you need more than that.
Yeah.
Come on, we gotta jack this up here a little bit. And I just appreciated that so much, where I feel like you had my back in that, and you were gonna make sure that I could do what I'm supposed to do. And I feel like you do that for every single member of the staff. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was low. You came in with a number that was low. And the thing is, as we talk about vision and the direction that we want to go with the Heights, that's where we really feel God's called us. He's called us to be a part of the Great Commission, right? And evangelism is a part of making disciples, baptism, teaching them all the things I've commanded you, discipleship. And that's where we want to be as a church. That's where we are going. And so we have to create some resources to make evangelism the thing around here and flourish around here.
It's almost like our mission statement is waking the world up to Jesus.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's almost like it.
Well, Richard, thank you for coming on and doing this and letting us get a chance to pepper you with questions and get to know you better, but also for teaching us how we can live out of the calling that God has placed on our lives. And just the fact that the calling God's placed on our life, we're here now. If we're faithful, what we'll see is who knows what the call will be next.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, an honor to be part of this podcast. And man, what a joy it is just to serve with you guys on this team. And what a joy it is to serve with our entire team. God has blessed us with some solid folks around here.
Amen, brother. Thanks for the time.
You bet.